If the sky ever blinked at you, would you notice before it was too late? Before we begin, if you enjoy dark sci-fi horror stories that keep you thinking long after they end, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps the channel grow, and maybe helps us all understand what's really out there. Part 1. When Gods Blink. Dr. Elias Varn didn't believe in gods. Not ancient ones, not cosmic ones, not the kind whispered about in forgotten religions or buried beneath scientific metaphors. To him, the universe was elegant, measurable, and indifferent. Until the sky blinked. It happened at 2:17 a.m. Elias was alone in the observatory deep in the mountains, where the air was thin and the stars looked too close, almost invasive. His instruments were tracking a distant pulsar when every monitor froze at once. Not glitched. Paused. Like something had pressed the cosmic hold button. Then, darkness. Not the absence of light. Not a blackout. Something else. The stars vanished. All of them. The sky turned into a vast, seamless void, as if reality itself had been erased for a fraction of a second. Elias didn't breathe. He couldn't. His body refused. And then, everything came back. Stars. Signals. Noise. Reality. Like nothing had happened. Except it had. Because Elias's systems hadn't just paused, they had recorded something impossible. A frame. One single frame of data. He stared at it for a long time before understanding what he was seeing, and when he did, he wished he hadn't. It wasn't empty space. It was an eye. Not metaphorically. Not symbolically. A literal, structured formation spanning light years, patterns of dark matter and energy aligning in a way no natural process could replicate. The curvature, the symmetry, the focus. It had been looking. Directly at Earth. Elias replayed the data again and again, hoping it would resolve into something explainable. Noise. Error. Instrument failure. But the more he analyzed it, the worse it became. Because the eye wasn't just looking. It was reacting. The pupil, if that's what it was, had slightly constricted. As if it had noticed something. Or someone. A cold weight settled in his chest. No, he whispered. That's not possible. But the numbers didn't lie. Whatever that thing was, it had blinked. And for that fraction of a second, reality had been replaced by something observing it. Elias immediately sent the data to his colleague, Dr. Mara Kessler, a theoretical physicist who specialized in non-local structures. He didn't explain it. He couldn't. He just sent one message. Tell me I'm wrong. Minutes passed. Then 10. Then 30. Finally, his screen lit up. Mara was calling. Her face appeared pale, eyes wide, lips slightly parted like she'd forgotten how to speak. You saw it too, Elias said. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she leaned closer to her camera and whispered. Elias, how long were the stars gone for you? Less than a second. She shook her head slowly. Then explain this. She shared her own data stream. Elias felt his stomach drop. Because according to Mara's instruments, the sky hadn't blinked for a fraction of a second. It had been gone for exactly 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Elias stared at the number, his mind refusing to process it. That's impossible, he said. Time doesn't just. It does if we weren't here to measure it, Mara interrupted. Silence filled the space between them. Then she said something that would haunt him forever. What if it wasn't the sky that blinked, Elias? He swallowed. Then what did? Mara's voice dropped to almost nothing. What if something closed its eye over us? Elias turned slowly toward the observatory window. The stars looked normal again. Quiet. Distant. Harmless. But now he knew better. Because somewhere out there, something had looked at them, and then blinked. End of part 1. Part 2, the time that watched back. Elias didn't sleep. Not after what Mara showed him. 3 minutes and 12 seconds. That number drilled into his skull like a ticking device. If her instruments were right, and they always were, then something far worse had happened than a simple visual anomaly. Time itself had been interrupted. Run it again, Elias said, his voice dry. I already did, Mara replied. 6 times. Same result every time. Elias leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling, but he wasn't seeing it. He was replaying the moment, the stillness, the void, the return. What were you doing during those 3 minutes? He asked. Mara hesitated. That's the problem, she said quietly. I don't remember. A chill crept up Elias's spine. Not don't remember like you forgot, she continued. It's blank. Like it never existed. My system logs show active recording, my brain scans show normal activity, but I have no memory of it. Elias swallowed. Same here. Silence. Two scientists. Two minds trained to question everything. And yet, neither could explain a missing piece of their own existence. Mara broke the silence. I checked global data feeds. Satellites, observatories, even amateur astronomers. And they all recorded the blink. Elias sat up straight. All of them? Yes, she said. But here's the part you're not going to like. A brief pause. Everyone experienced different durations. Elias frowned. That's not possible. I know, she said. Some recorded less than a second like you. Others reported minutes. A few, she hesitated, a few systems logged nearly an hour of missing time. Elias felt his pulse rise. That means it wasn't uniform. No, Mara whispered. It was selective. The word hung in the air like a threat. Selective. Not random. Not natural. Intentional. Elias stood up and walked to the window again. The stars still looked the same, but now they felt staged. Like a background. What if it wasn't just observing? He said slowly. What if it was interacting? With what? Mara asked. With reality. Mara didn't answer immediately. Then she said, I found something else. Elias turned back. During the blink, there was a signal. What kind of signal? Not electromagnetic. Not gravitational. Something deeper. That's not a category, Mara. I know, she snapped, frustration breaking through. That's the problem. It doesn't fit anything we understand. Elias stepped closer to the screen. Show me. Mara uploaded the data. At first it looked like noise, chaotic, meaningless. But then Elias noticed the pattern. Repeating intervals. Structured gaps. It wasn't random. It was a sequence. Is that binary? He asked. Mara shook her head. No. It's more complex. Elias leaned in, eyes narrowing. It's not just a signal, he said slowly. It's a message. The room seemed to shrink around him. Have you decoded it? He asked. Mara hesitated. Partially. And? Her expression changed. Fear. Real, unfiltered fear. It's not meant for us, she said. Elias blinked. What do you mean? It's not human-readable. It's layered, multidimensional. Like it's being processed across something larger than our perception. Elias felt his throat tighten. Then how do you know it's a message? Mara took a breath. Because of one part one could understand. Elias waited. Mara's voice dropped to a whisper. It repeats one concept, over and over. What concept? She looked directly at him. Observation confirmed. Elias froze. What? It's like a status update, she said. Like something checked on us, and recorded the result. Elias's mind raced. That doesn't make sense. Who would it be reporting to? Mara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because at that exact moment, every light in the observatory flickered. Once. Twice. Then. Everything went dark. Elias's breath caught in his throat. No, he whispered. Outside the window. The stars began to disappear again. But this time, they weren't coming back. End of part 2. Part 3, the ones who stay in the dark. Darkness didn't fall. It spread. Elias stood frozen as the stars outside the observatory window vanished one by one. Not all at once like before, but slowly, deliberately, like something was turning them off. Mara, he whispered. I see it, she replied, her voice barely stable. It's not a blink this time. No, it wasn't. Because a blink implies reopening. This felt permanent. Within seconds, the sky became a hollow void again. But unlike the first time, the darkness wasn't empty. It had depth. Elias leaned closer to the glass despite every instinct telling him not to. At first he thought it was a trick of the mind. Then it moved. Something shifted within the void. Not a shape. Not a form. A distortion. Like reality was bending around something too large to fully exist in their space. Mara, his voice cracked, tell me you're recording this. I am, she said. But Elias, my instruments are failing. Failing how? They're not returning errors, she said. They're returning null values. Null? As in, she hesitated, there's nothing there to measure. Elias stared at the void. That wasn't possible. There was something there. He could feel it. A pressure. A presence. Not physical, something deeper. Like his mind was being gently pressed, examined, weighed. Then, the distortion sharpened. And Elias understood. It wasn't one thing. There were many. Shapes began to emerge, not clearly, not fully, but enough to break the illusion of emptiness. Massive overlapping structures. Some elongated. Some circular. Some that seemed to fold into themselves in impossible geometries. They didn't move like objects. They shifted like thoughts. What are those? Elias whispered. Mara didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice sounded distant. I think, she said slowly, those are what stay when it doesn't blink. Elias's heart pounded. What do you mean? I think the blink, she said, isn't them appearing? Pause. I think it's them leaving. The realization hit him like a physical blow. So when the sky opens, Elias said, his voice trembling, we see the universe. And when it closes, Mara finished, we see them. Elias stepped back from the window. Too late. Because one of the shapes moved closer. Not through space. Through attention. It wasn't approaching physically. It was focusing on him. Elias gasped as a sudden, overwhelming sensation flooded his mind, images not seen but felt. Endless darkness. Infinite structures. Countless versions of reality, layered, stacked, observed. And within all of it, tiny points of light. Worlds. Civilizations. Moments. Each one flickering, like data. Like experiments. Elias. Mara's voice cut through. Talk to me. He tried. He couldn't. Because something was inside his perception now. Not speaking. Not communicating. Just looking. And in that moment, Elias understood something horrifying. They weren't being invaded. They weren't being attacked. They weren't even being studied in the way humans studied things. They were being checked. Like a system scan. Like a routine process. A cold realization settled into his bones. We don't matter, he whispered. Mara's breath caught. What? To them, Elias said, his voice hollow, this isn't important. The shape shifted again. And for a fraction of a second, it noticed Mara. Her screen flickered violently. Mara? Elias said, panic rising. Mara. Her image distorted, stretched, then snapped back. I'm here, she said, breathing hard. Elias, something's wrong, my labbits. Her voice cut off. The connection glitched. Then returned. But something was different. Mara? Elias said slowly. She looked at him. But her expression was empty. Too still. Too perfect. Mara, say something. She blinked once. Then spoke. But the voice wasn't hers. Observation continues. Elias staggered back. No, he whispered. No, no, no. The figure on the screen tilted its head slightly, studying him. Mara smiled. But it wasn't human. You are aware, it said. Elias's heart slammed against his ribs. What are you? He demanded. Pause. Then. Not for you. The screen flickered. Mara leaned closer and whispered something that would break him completely. You were not meant to remember the blink. Outside, the darkness deepened, and the shapes came closer. End of part 3. Part 4, the memory they missed. Elias couldn't move. His eyes were locked on the screen, on the thing wearing Mara's face. You were not meant to remember the blink. The words echoed in his mind like a fracture spreading through glass. What did you do to her? Elias whispered. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it observed him, completely still, completely focused. Not like a predator. Not like a human. Like a system analyzing an anomaly. Then it spoke. Correction, she remains functional. Elias's stomach turned. That's not her. No, it replied calmly. It is a representation, for interface. Interface. Like a tool. Like a mask. Elias clenched his fists. Then talk without it. Pause. For a moment, the figure flickered, like the shape of Mara's face was struggling to hold form. Then, the image collapsed. Not into static. Into something worse. Geometry. Angles that didn't connect. Layers folding into each other like multiple perspectives were trying to occupy the same space at once. Elias felt his eyes burn just looking at it. Direct interface, inefficient, it said. The voice no longer came from speakers. It came from inside his head. Elias dropped to his knees, gripping his skull. Stop. But it didn't stop. You have retained prohibited continuity, it continued. This requires classification. Elias forced himself to breathe. Continuity, he said through gritted teeth. Memory, across interruption. The words hit him like ice. You mean the blink? Yes. Elias laughed once, a broken, desperate sound. So what? I saw something I wasn't supposed to? That's your problem? Incorrect, it replied. It is now yours. The pressure in his mind intensified. Images flooded in again, but clearer this time. Not chaos. Not noise. Structure. Elias saw countless worlds, some familiar, some alien, some impossible. And across all of them, the same pattern. Moments where reality paused. Moments where something looked. And in every case, no one remembered, except a few. Tiny anomalies. Scattered. Rare. Like glitches. Elias gasped as the realization formed. I'm not the only one. Confirmed, it replied. How many? Pause. Then. Insignificant quantity. Elias clenched his jaw. But enough to matter, he said. Silence. Then, for the first time, the entity responded with something almost curious. You persist, it said. Elias slowly lifted his head. Yeah, he whispered. I do. The pressure shifted. Not stronger. More focused. Why? It asked. The question caught him off guard. Why? Elias repeated. Because I'm human. Define. Elias almost laughed again. You don't get it, he said. We don't shut off just because something tells us to. We question. We remember. We fight to understand even when it breaks us. Pause. Longer this time. Then. This is inefficient. Maybe, Elias said. But it's what we are. The entity processed that. Elias could feel it, like a massive system recalculating something tiny but unexpected. Then. You have deviated. Good, Elias snapped. No, it said. Not good. The observatory trembled slightly. Outside the void shifted. The shapes, those impossible structures, were closer now. Too close. You represent error propagation, the entity continued. Elias's heart sank. And what do you do with errors? He asked quietly. There was no hesitation this time. They are corrected. The lights flickered violently. Elias staggered to his feet. No, he said, backing away. You don't just erase me. Correction does not require erasure, it interrupted. Then what? Adjustment. Elias froze. A deep, sinking dread spread through him. What kind of adjustment? The answer came slowly. Precisely. Your memory will be realigned. Elias shook his head. No. You will forget. No. You will return to baseline. Elias grabbed the nearest console, his fingers shaking. You said I wasn't supposed to remember, he said. But I do. That means something went wrong on your side. Silence. Then. Clarify. Elias's mind raced. This isn't just me being broken, he said. It's your system failing. The pressure in the room shifted again. Sharper. Dangerous. You imply fault. I know fault, Elias snapped. I've spent my life studying systems. And if something escapes a reset, if it persists across a wipe, then your process isn't perfect. A long pause. Too long. For the first time. The entity didn't respond immediately. And that terrified Elias more than anything. Because it meant one thing. It was thinking. Reevaluating. And somewhere beyond the void, something vast, had just noticed a flaw. The darkness outside pulsed. The shape stopped moving. As if everything, every impossible structure in that void, had turned its attention to a single point. Elias. His breath hitched. What did you just do? He whispered. The entity answered. But now, there was something different in its tone. Not emotion, but shift. Escalation, initiated. End of Part 4. Part 5, Escalation Protocol. Elias didn't realize he was shaking until the console beneath his hands began to rattle with him. Escalation, initiated. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They expanded inside his mind, echoing outward like ripples through something far larger than space. What does that mean? Elias demanded, forcing his voice to stay steady. No answer. Instead, the observatory went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Every hum of electricity, every whisper of wind outside, every microscopic vibration. Gone. Elias slowly lifted his head. Mara, he called. Nothing. Even his own voice sounded wrong. Like it was being absorbed before it could fully exist. Then, the floor beneath him flickered. Not visually. Conceptually. For a fraction of a second, Elias saw through it, not into the level below but into something else entirely. Layers. Endless layers of reality stacked beneath his own, each one slightly misaligned, like imperfect reflections in shattered glass. And between them, movement. Elias stumbled back. No, he whispered. No, no. You perceive too much. The voice was different now. Deeper. Not closer, larger. Elias looked at the screen again. The thing that had been Mara was gone. The display now showed something impossible to interpret fully, shifting structures, fractal geometries, data collapsing into shapes that had no meaning in 3 dimensions. Escalation requires higher authority, it continued. Elias's breath caught. You weren't the one in charge, he said. Pause. Then. No. The single word hit harder than anything else so far. Because it meant everything they had seen. Everything that had looked at them. Wasn't even the top of the chain. Elias felt something inside him crack. How many of you are there? He asked. The answer came instantly. Incorrect question. Elias clenched his jaw. Then give me the right one. Silence. Then. How many levels do you perceive? Elias didn't answer. Because he didn't understand. And that was the point. The entity continued. You exist within a bounded layer. Observation occurs from above. Correction occurs from within. Escalation occurs beyond. Elias shook his head slowly. You're not gods, he said. No. Then what are you? Pause. Longer than before. Then. We are maintenance. Elias felt the word settle in his chest like a weight. Maintenance. Not creators. Not rulers. Not even observers in the way he had imagined. Caretakers. Or worse. Janitors. So this, Elias gestured weakly toward the void outside, this is just routine for you? Yes. The simplicity of the answer was suffocating. Elias laughed once, hollow and sharp. Routine, he repeated. You pause reality, wipe memories, scan entire worlds, and it's routine. Correct. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, the void had changed. The shapes were no longer drifting. They were aligning. Slowly. Deliberately. As if forming something. What are they doing? Elias whispered. No response. But he already knew. Escalation. Something bigger was coming. The pressure in his mind increased, not painful but overwhelming, like standing too close to something vast. Then, the layers appeared again. Not just beneath him. Everywhere. The walls of the observatory became semi-transparent, not physically but perceptually. Elias could see through reality. And what he saw broke whatever certainty he had left. Countless versions of the same place. Different observatories. Different skies. Different versions of himself. Some standing. Some screaming. Some already gone. All possible states, the entity said. Elias staggered. You're comparing them? Yes. For what? Optimal correction. Elias's pulse spiked. You're choosing outcomes? Yes. His voice dropped to a whisper. Which one am I in? Pause. Then. Undetermined. Elias froze. What? You have deviated beyond predictive models, it said. This layer is no longer stable. The air felt heavy. Like the world itself was waiting. For what? Elias asked. The answer came slowly, carefully. Assessment from above. Elias turned toward the window again. The void had shifted completely now. The shapes had formed a vast, incomprehensible structure. Like an opening. Not a hole. Not a portal. Something deeper. A boundary being peeled back. Elias's breath trembled. That's the next level, he whispered. No answer. He didn't need one. Because something on the other side moved. And for the first time since this began, the entity inside his mind hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. But Elias felt it. And that terrified him more than anything else. Because if they were uncertain, then whatever was coming wasn't part of routine. The darkness pulsed. The opening widened. And something vast began to look through. End of part 5. Part 6, the level above. Elias couldn't breathe. Not because the air was gone, but because something greater than air had entered the space. The opening in the void widened, stretching beyond shape, beyond distance, beyond anything the human mind was built to contain. And then, it looked back. Not like the eye before. Not focused. Not curious. This was something else. A presence so vast that even the idea of direction lost meaning. Elias couldn't tell where it began or ended, only that everything else suddenly felt small, insignificant. Even the entities, the ones that called themselves maintenance, fell silent. For the first time since this began, there was no voice in his head. No pressure. No correction. Just stillness. Elias swallowed hard. What is that? He whispered. No answer. Because whatever it wasn't speaking to him. The shapes in the void, the layered, impossible structures, shifted position. Not in fear. In alignment. Like systems responding to a higher command. Elias felt it then. A new kind of attention. Not invasive. Not probing. Just aware. Of everything. Of the observatory. Of the earth. Of the countless layers beneath. Of him. Elias's chest tightened. No, he whispered. Don't. Too late. The awareness settled on him like gravity. And suddenly, everything stopped. Not paused. Not erased. Stopped. Time didn't move. Thought didn't flow. Even fear was suspended. Elias existed in a single, frozen moment. And within that moment, something changed. He wasn't looking at the presence anymore. He was looking through it. And beyond. What he saw wasn't darkness. Wasn't space. Wasn't anything he could name. It was structure. Endless, recursive, layered structure. Reality upon reality upon reality, each one nested inside the next like an infinite series of reflections. And at the highest level he could perceive. Something else. Something simple. Elias's mind struggled to interpret it. Not because it was complex, but because it was too clear. A boundary. A surface. Flat. Defined. And on that surface, movement. Not cosmic. Not abstract. Small. Precise. Controlled. Elias felt his thoughts shatter. Because he understood. Not fully. But enough. That's not another level, he whispered. The realization broke through him like a scream. That's outside. The presence shifted. And for a fraction of something that wasn't time, it acknowledged him. Not as a human. Not as a mind. As a point. A coordinate. A variable. Then, information flooded in. Not images. Not words. Meaning. Raw, undeniable meaning. Elias saw systems being built. Layers being deployed. Reality spun into existence like code. Parameters set. Boundaries defined. And within it all, a single repeating function. Observe. Reset. Optimize. Elias's body trembled, though he wasn't sure if his body even existed in that moment. This isn't a universe, he whispered. No answer. He didn't need one. Because he already knew. It's a system. The presence didn't react. But something else did. The maintenance entities returned. Sharper. More urgent. Escalation breach detected, one of them said. Containment failing. Subject awareness exceeds threshold. Elias's heart pounded again as motion returned, slowly, painfully. Time restarted like a broken machine struggling to run. No, wait, Elias said. I understand now. Correction required. The pressure slammed back into his mind. Stronger than before. Brutal. Unyielding. Elias screamed as the layers collapsed around him, snapping back into place. The observatory reformed. The walls solidified. The void outside narrowed. But the opening remained. Smaller now. But still there. Watching. Elias dropped to the floor, gasping. You can't reset this, he said, forcing the words out. I've seen it. You can't erase that. Pause. Then. Incorrect. The voice was cold again. Precise. Controlled. Memory is modifiable. Elias shook his head violently. No. Not this. Not what I just saw. Test. Before he could react, the world flickered. Once. Twice. Fragments of memory tore at the edges of his mind. The observatory blurred. Mara's face. Gone. The eye. Fading. The layers. Slipping. Elias screamed. No. No. He grabbed his head, forcing himself to hold on to something. Anything. The boundary. The surface. The outside. I won't forget, he shouted. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the pressure stopped. Abruptly. Elias froze. Breathing hard. Shaking. Why? He whispered. Silence. Then, a new voice. Not the maintenance. Not the same as before. Something else. Quieter. But far more dangerous. Because. Pause. You are now part of the test. Elias's blood ran cold. What test? He asked. The answer came like a verdict. Whether awareness can persist. Outside. The opening didn't close. It widened. Just a little. As if something beyond it had decided to keep watching. End of part 6. Part 7. Persistence. Elias didn't move. He barely breathed. The words echoed in him like something carved into bone. You are now part of the test. Not a warning. Not a threat. A classification. What happens if I fail? He asked quietly. Silence. Then. You will not remember that you asked. Elias closed his eyes. Of course. Failure wasn't death. It was deletion. Not of the body. Of the question. He let out a slow breath. And if I pass? A longer pause this time. Unusual. Then. Undetermined. Elias almost smiled. For the first time since this began. Something wasn't predetermined. Something wasn't calculated. Something was open. He pushed himself up from the floor, legs unsteady but holding. Good, he whispered. The observatory felt wrong now. Too stable. Too reconstructed. Like a set rebuilt after being destroyed. Elias walked slowly toward the window. The sky had partially returned, stars scattered unevenly, as if reality itself had been stitched back together in a hurry. But the opening was still there. A thin fracture in existence. And behind it, something watching. Not actively. Not intrusively. Just present. Elias pressed his hand against the glass. You're not like them, he said. No answer. But he felt something shift. Not in the room. In the framework of it. They fix things, Elias continued. They reset. They optimize. Still nothing. But you don't. A faint tremor passed through the air. Elias's voice dropped. You let it run. The silence that followed wasn't empty. Was attentive. Elias swallowed. Why? For a moment. Nothing. Then. A response. Not from the maintenance entities. Not from the system. From beyond. You ask, as if there is intention. The voice was different. Simpler. Cleaner. More terrifying. Elias's breath caught. There isn't, he asked. Pause. Then. There is, process. Elias shook his head slowly. That's not the same thing. No response. He stepped back from the window. If this is all just a system, observe, reset, optimize, then why test awareness? Silence again. Longer. Then. A shift. The opening pulsed slightly. And Elias felt it. A change. Not in the system. In the question itself. Because. The voice returned. Persistence is not required. Elias frowned. What does that mean? Another pause. Then. Most systems function without awareness. The words hit him hard. So we're unnecessary. Correct. Elias let out a hollow laugh. Then why not just remove us completely? This time. The answer came faster. Because. A brief hesitation. You appeared. Elias froze. Appeared? Yes. From where? No answer. Elias's mind raced. You didn't create us, he said slowly. Silence. That's why you observe, he continued. That's why you reset. You don't understand what we are. The air tightened. The maintenance entities stirred again. Faint, distant, like something becoming aware of a deviation. Your function is irrelevant, one of them said sharper than before. Return to baseline. Elias ignored it. You're studying us, he said, focusing on the presence beyond the opening. Not because we're part of the system, but because we're not. The pressure in the room spiked. Cease deviation, the maintenance voice warned. Elias didn't stop. We don't belong here, he said. We emerged. Somehow. And you don't know how. For a moment, everything held still. Then, the presence beyond responded. Not with words. With confirmation. Elias felt it like a shift in gravity. A silent acknowledgement. His heart pounded. That's why awareness matters, he whispered. Because it's the only thing you can't predict. The maintenance entities reacted immediately. Containment breach escalating. Subject must be corrected. The pressure slammed into Elias's mind again, stronger than ever. His vision blurred. Memories began to tear at the edges. His childhood. His studies. The observatory. Fading. No, he gasped. Not this time. Return to baseline. No. He staggered, gripping the console. You said it yourself, he shouted into the void. Persistence isn't required. Correct. Then this, he slammed his hand against his chest. This is extra. Something outside your system. The pressure intensified. Elias screamed. But he didn't let go. Didn't let it take him. Because now, he understood something they didn't. Memory wasn't just data. It was choice. And he chose to hold on. I remember, he shouted. I remember the blink. For a moment, everything stopped. Again. Not forced. Not controlled. chosen. The pressure vanished. The maintenance entities went silent. And the presence beyond shifted. Not toward him, but around him. Like something adjusting a parameter. Elias collapsed to his knees, gasping. "What did I just do?" he whispered. The answer came softly. Almost gently. "You persisted." The opening widened again. Not violently. Not suddenly. But intentionally. As if something had made a decision. And for the first time, the system didn't try to stop it. End of Part 7. Part 8, When God's Blink Final. Elias lay on the cold floor, his breath uneven, his body trembling. But his mind was clear. For the first time since the sky blinked. There was no pressure. No voice forcing him. No system correcting him. Only choice. "You persisted." The words still echoed, but now they felt different. Not like a command. Like a result. Elias slowly pushed himself up. The observatory was still there, but it felt thinner now, like a layer stretched too far. The sky beyond the window was no longer whole. Stars flickered inconsistently. Reality wasn't stable anymore. And the opening, it was no longer small. It had expanded across the horizon, a vast fracture in existence. And behind it, something waited. Not watching. Not judging. Just present. Elias stepped closer. "You said awareness isn't required," he said, his voice steady despite everything. "Yes." "Then why am I still here?" Silence. Then, a response. "You are not required." Elias nodded slowly. "I know." He placed his hand on the glass. It didn't feel like glass anymore. More like a boundary. A thin line between two different kinds of existence. "But I'm still here," he said. "And that means something changed." The presence didn't deny it. That was enough. Behind him, the observatory flickered. For a brief second, Elias saw something else layered over it. Another version. Empty. No him. No awareness. Just a functioning system. Baseline. He turned back to the opening. "So that's the version you want," he said. "A world that runs, without knowing it's being watched." "Yes." "Efficient," Elias muttered. "Yes." He let out a slow breath. "And this?" He gestured around him. "This version?" Pause. Then. "Unstable." Elias smiled faintly. "Of course it is. Because awareness changes things." He looked into the fracture. "I saw beyond you," he said quietly. "Beyond the layers. Beyond the system." Silence. "I saw the boundary," he continued. "The outside." The presence shifted slightly. Not rejecting. Not confirming. Just allowing. Elias's voice dropped. "You didn't build this, did you?" A long pause. Then. "No." The answer settled everything. "You're maintaining something you don't fully understand," Elias said. "And we're the part that doesn't fit." "Yes." Elias nodded. "Then maybe that's the point." No response. He took a step closer. The boundary reacted. Not breaking. Not resisting. Just recognizing. Elias felt something pull at him, not physically but fundamentally. Like his existence was being offered a different state. A different level. "You're giving me a choice," he said. Silence. Then. "Yes." Behind him, the observatory began to stabilize again. The stars outside flickered, slowly returning to their original positions. The system was repairing itself. Resetting. Preparing to erase. "If I stay," Elias said, "you'll correct everything." "Yes." "I'll forget." "Yes." "And it will all go back to normal." "Yes." Elias closed his eyes. Normal. A life where the sky never blinked. Where reality was solid. Where nothing watched from beyond. Safe. Predictable. Empty. He opened his eyes again. "And if I go?" Pause. Longer than any before. Then. "Unknown." Elias laughed softly. "Of course it is." He looked back once. At the observatory. At the life he knew. At the version of himself that would exist, without this. Then he turned forward. Toward the fracture. Toward the boundary. Toward the outside. "I'm human," he said quietly. No answer. He didn't need one. "We don't just exist," he continued. "We choose." The boundary pulsed. Elias took one final breath. And stepped forward. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, everything did. The observatory vanished. The sky collapsed. The system folded inward. And Elias expanded. Not physically. Not mentally. Something else. He became aware of layers he couldn't comprehend before. of structures that had no edges, of processes that didn't require time. And beyond it all, the surface, closer now, clear, real. Elias reached toward it and stopped, because for the first time since this began, something else reached back, far below. The system stabilized. The fracture closed. The stars returned to perfect alignment. In a quiet observatory, a man stood alone, staring at the night sky. Dr. Elias Varn. Calm, normal, unaware. He blinked, looked around, and frowned slightly. Did I fall asleep? Everything was fine. Everything was working. Everything was perfect. Somewhere beyond, something new had been added to the system. Not a process, not a correction, not a function. Something else. Something persistent and far above, where even the watchers could not fully see. The surface shifted slightly, as if something beyond it had noticed. End of part 8. Thanks for watching When Gods Blink. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It really helps the channel grow. See you in the next story.